My dear students, welcome back to our channel. In this video, I will be explaining the Bachelor of Computer Applications second semester subject OP with CPP as prescribed by Osmania University and other universities of Telangana. We will go through the important questions and answers one by one. Let's begin with a quick revision. Unit 2, the important short question is: write the syntax of nested if statement with example. Nested if statement in C++. A nested if statement is when one if statement is placed inside another. It allows you to test multiple conditions in a structured way. This is useful when you need to check for more than one condition before performing an action. Syntax: if condition 1. If condition 2. Code to be executed if both condition 1 and condition 2 are true. Example: let's say you want to check if a student is eligible for a scholarship based on their grade and attendance. Explanation: first, it checks if the grade is greater than 80. Then, if the grade is correct, it checks if the attendance is greater than 75. Easy to remember. Nested if is equal to one if inside another. Like checking conditions in steps. Next important short question is: to class and object define syntax and example. Class and object in C++. Class. A class is like a blueprint or template for creating objects. It defines the attributes, data, and methods, functions that the object will have. Object. An object is an instance of a class. It's like a real-world entity created based on the class template. Example: imagine a class for a car. The class defines the car's attributes like color and speed, and its methods like start or stop. Then, you create an object, a specific car, from the class. Easy to remember. Class is equal to blueprint, object is equal to real thing. A class defines, an object acts. Next important short question is: 3. Memory allocation for objects in C++. In C++, memory for objects can be allocated in two ways: automatic memory allocation and dynamic memory allocation. 1. Automatic memory allocation, stack allocation. When you create an object inside a function, memory is allocated automatically on the stack. The object is destroyed when it goes out of scope, i.e., when the function finishes. Example: 2. Dynamic memory allocation, heap allocation. You can allocate memory for an object during runtime using new keyword. This is called dynamic memory allocation, and it happens on the heap. You must manually free the memory using the delete keyword. Example: easy to remember. Stack is equal to automatic, heap is equal to manual. Objects on the stack are automatic, on the heap, you manage them. Next important short question is: 4. What is an array of objects in C++? Array of objects in C++. An array of objects is a collection of objects that are created from a single class. Just like how an array stores multiple values of a simple data type, like int or float, an array of objects stores multiple instances of a class. Why use it? It helps manage multiple objects of the same type in a structured way. For example, you can store details of multiple cars, objects, in a single array. Example: Easy to remember. Array of objects is equal to multiple cars in one garage. You can handle many objects, cars, in one place, array. Next important short question is 5. What is returning object in C++? Returning object in C++. In C++, you can return an object from a function, just like returning simple data types like int or float. This allows a function to create and return an instance, object of a class. How does it work? When you return an object, a copy of the object is returned to the calling function. This helps in creating modular and reusable code. Example. Easy to remember. Returning object is equal to sending a ready-made car back from a factory. A function creates an object and returns it, so you can use it in another part of the code. Next important short question is 6. Define function with example. What is a function in C++? A function in C++ is a block of code that performs a specific task. It helps in organizing and reusing code. You can call a function multiple times to avoid repeating the same code. Syntax of a function. Easy to remember. Function is equal to task performer. It performs a specific job, and you can call it whenever needed. Next important short question is 7. What is function prototyping in C++? Function prototyping in C++ is a way of declaring a function before you actually define it. It tells the compiler about the function's name, return type, and parameters so that the compiler knows what to expect when the function is called. Why is it important? It helps the compiler to ensure that the function is called correctly, with the right number and type of arguments. It also allows you to use the function before it is fully defined. Syntax. Example. Easy to remember. Prototyping is equal to pre-announcement of functions. It tells the compiler in advance what the function looks like, so it can check for mistakes. Next important short question is 8. What is the difference between static and dynamic class? Difference between static and dynamic classes in C++. In C++, static and dynamic classes refer to how memory is allocated and managed for objects of those classes. 1. Static class. A static class is a class where memory is allocated at compile time. The class members, variables and methods are shared among all instances, objects of the class. Objects of a static class are created at the time of class definition. Example. Two. Dynamic class. A dynamic class uses heap memory, and objects are created during runtime using the new keyword. Each object has its own separate memory space. Example. Easy to remember. Static is equal to shared memory, dynamic is equal to separate memory. Static shares, dynamic separates. Next. Unit 2. Important. Long questions. First important long question is: explain the difference between while and do while with necessary examples. Difference between while and do while loops in C++. Both while and do while are loop structures in C++ that allow code to be repeated, but they differ in how they execute. 1. While loop. Condition is checked before execution. If the condition is false at the start, The loop may not execute even once. Useful when you are not sure if the loop will run at least once. Syntax. Example of while loop. Output. To do while loop. Condition is checked after execution. This ensures the loop will run at least once, even if the condition is false on the first check. Useful when you need the code to execute at least once before checking the condition. Syntax. Example of do while loop. Output. Key differences. Feature while loop, do while loop. Condition check before executing the loop, after executing the loop. Minimum iterations 0 iterations, if condition is false, 1 iteration, even if condition is false. When to use, when the loop may not need to run at all. When you need to ensure the loop runs at least once. Easy to remember. While is equal to check first, do while is equal to do first. In a while loop, you check before doing anything, while in a do while loop, you do something before checking. Next important long question is: 2. What is a class? How do you specify a class? What is a class in C++? A class in C++ is a blueprint or template for creating objects. It defines the properties, variables, and behaviors, functions, that the objects of that class will have. Think of a class as a recipe, and the objects are the dishes you make using that recipe. How do you specify a class? To define a class in C++, we use the class keyword followed by the name of the class. Inside the class, we specify the data members, attributes, and member functions, methods, that belong to the class. Syntax of a class. Public means that the members of the class are accessible from outside the class, important for interacting with the object. Data members, variables that store the properties of an object. Member functions, functions that define the behavior of the object. Example. Output. Explanation. Class definition. We define a class named car with 2 data members, color and speed, and a member function, display. Objects. In the main function, we create 2 objects, car1 and car2, of the class car. Each object has its own color and speed. Function call, the display function is called for each object to display their details. Easy to remember. Class is equal to recipe, object is equal to dish. A class is like a recipe that defines how an object should look and behave, and the object is the actual instance created using that recipe. Next important long question is: 3. Arrays within class. Write example program with output. Arrays within a class in C++. In C++, we can use arrays inside a class to store multiple values. Arrays within a class work just like any regular array in C++, but are used to hold multiple data values as part of the object. How to define an array inside a class? You can define an array as a data member of the class. You can then access and modify the array elements using member functions or directly from the object. Syntax. Example program. Explanation. Class definition. The class student has an array marks to store marks for 5 subjects. Member functions. Input marks, asks the user to input marks for the 5 subjects. Display marks displays the marks entered. Object creation in the main function, an object S1 is created and the functions are used to input and display the marks. Sample output. Enter marks for 5 subjects 80, 90, 75, 85, 95. Marks in 5 subjects 80, 90, 75, 85, 95. Explanation of the output. The program first asks the user to input marks for 5 subjects, then displays those marks. Easy to remember. Class is equal to box, array is equal to collection. A class can store multiple pieces of data using an array, just like a box can hold several items. Next important long question is: for static data members, write example program with output. Static data members in C++. In C++, static data members are variables that are shared among all objects of a class. Unlike regular data members, which have different values for each object, a static data member has a single value that is common across all objects of the class. Key points about static data members. A static data member is declared using the static keyword. It is shared by all instances, objects of the class. It is initialized only once, regardless of how many objects are created. You can access static members using the class name or by using an object, but it's usually accessed using the class name. Syntax. Example program. Explanation. Static data member, count. The count variable is static, so it is shared by all objects of the counter class. Constructor. Every time an object is created, the constructor increments the count variable, keeping track of how many objects have been created. Static function. The displayCount function is static, meaning it can access the static data member without needing an object. Output. Number of objects created, 3. Explanation of the output. Even though we created 3 objects of the class counter, the static data member count keeps track of the total number of objects created. The output shows that 3 objects were created. Easy to remember. Static is equal to shared by all objects. Static data members are like a single counter that keeps track of something common to all objects, no matter how many are created. Next important long question is: 5. Differentiate call by reference and return by reference. Call by reference versus return by reference in C++. In C++, both call by reference and return by reference are mechanisms used to manipulate data, but they work differently. Let's look at each concept in detail with examples. Call by reference. In call by reference, when a function is called, the actual memory address of the argument is passed to the function. This means that any changes made to the argument inside the function will directly affect the original data outside the function. How it works? You pass the reference address of the variable to the function. The function directly modifies the original variable. Example. Output. Value of x after add 15. Explanation. The function add modifies the original value of x because the reference address of x is passed, not just a copy. Return by reference. In return by reference, a function returns a reference memory address to the calling function, allowing it to directly modify the variable in the calling function. This is usually used when you want to modify a value and return the updated data. How it works? The function returns a reference not a copy, to a variable. The calling function can modify this returned reference directly. Example. Output. Value of x after multiply by 2, 10. Explanation. The function multiply by 2 changes the original value of x and returns the reference to x. The modified value is reflected in the main function. Key differences. Aspect call by reference, return by reference. Function type used to modify arguments inside the function. Used to return a reference to a variable. How data is passed. The memory address of the variable is passed to the function. The function returns the address of a variable. Effect on original data changes the original data directly. Returns a reference to modify the original data. Usage modifies variables in the calling function. Useful for returning large data or modifying class members. Easy to remember. Call by reference, pass by address, modify the original. Return by reference, return the address, modify the original. By understanding the differences, you can decide when to use each technique based on whether you need to pass. Next important long question is 6. Explain inline functions. Write example program with output. Inline functions in C++. Made easy for Indian students. In C++, inline functions are small functions where the compiler replaces the function call with the actual code of the function during compilation. This avoids the overhead of calling the function again and again, making the program run a little faster. Why use inline functions? Saves time when a function is called many times. Best for small functions, like adding to numbers. Makes the code faster and reduces function call overhead. How to declare inline function? Use the keyword inline before the function definition. Example program. Output. Square of 5 is 25. Square of 10 is 100. Explanation. Square, int kiss smiley is an inline function. The compiler replaces square, num, with num asterisk num during compilation. There's no function call overhead, making it quicker. When to use inline? For short functions, 1 to 2 lines. For functions used frequently in the program. Important notes. Inline is only a request to the compiler. It may ignore it if the function is too big or uses loops or recursion. Too many inline functions can make your code size bigger, called code bloat. Easy to remember. Inline is equal to replace function call with function code. Just like copying a small recipe note into each notebook instead of flipping pages again and again. Next important long question is 7. Default arguments. Write example program with output. Default arguments in C++. Simple and easy explanation. In C++, default arguments are values that are automatically used by a function if no value is provided by the user during the function call. This makes the function flexible and easy to use. Why use default arguments? Helps reduce the number of function overloads. Makes function calls easier by providing default values. Useful when most of the time the same value is used for a parameter. How to declare default arguments? Default values are given in the function declaration. Return underscore type function underscore name, parameter 1 is equal to value 1, parameter 2 is equal to value 2. You must always start giving defaults from right to left, last parameters first. Example program. Output. Hello, student. Hello, Ravi. Welcome, Aisha. Explanation. In the function greet, both parameters have default values. When greet is called with no arguments, it uses both defaults. When greet Ravi is called, it uses default greeting and custom name. When all arguments are provided, it uses the provided values. Rules to remember. Default arguments should be provided from rightmost to left. You can mix default and non-default arguments. If all arguments are provided during function call, defaults are ignored. Easy to remember. If you forget to give a value, default will be used. Think of it like ordering a thali. If you don't mention spice level or side dish, the restaurant gives the default one. I hope you understand easily each question. All the best, students, for your upcoming exam. For other subject, quick revision. Important questions. Previous question papers. And syllabus. Links are available in description. Check out once. Thank you for watching. Like and share this video with your friends.